Now let's look at the actual story of Qawm Lut and the basic narrative in the Quran regarding Lut alayhi salam, the Prophet, and his people. So if we reflect on this narrative, it really answers every question that we have today about LGBT. And this is very significant, so we shouldn't ignore what Allah says in the Quran about Qawm Lut. So the basic narrative is that there are three guests that come to the Prophet Lut alayhi salam. And he at first did not know these guests, they were just travelers, but he noticed that they were extremely good looking, they're extremely handsome, and this made Lut very nervous. Why? Because Lut alayhi salam knew his people and that he knew the practice of his people, of same-sex behavior. And so shortly after these guests come to his home, his people storm his house. They surround his house and they are banging on the door and they're demanding that he forfeit his guests. They're demanding that he force his guests out to the mob. And according to some of the tafsir, these people were tipped off by the wife of Lut alayhi salam. So this is an interesting detail according to some of the tafsir. His wife was the one that let the people know, oh, there's these guests coming, and if you want to do what you want with them, to do so. So this is actually giving insight into the nature of Lut alayhi salam's wife, who, as you know, at the end of the narrative, she is also destroyed along with Qawm Lut. So these people are trying to storm his house, they're trying to get to his guests in order to commit their vile action with them. And Lut, of course, refuses this. He says he's not going to do this. And he says some key things that are important for us to reflect on. And so in the Quran, Allah says, إِذْ قَالَ لِقَوْمِهِ أَتَأْتُونَ الْفَاحِشَةَ مَا سَبَقَكُمْ بِهَا مِنْ أَحَدٍ مِنَ الْعَالَمِينَ. So Lut says, do you commit al-fahisha? Do you do al-fahisha, which is kind of enormity and indecency? Do you commit something that none has committed before you in all of the worlds? So this is the shock that Lut and the urgency with which he is speaking to his people. And then he specifies what al-fahisha is. He makes it very crystal clear so that there's no doubt about what their crime is that they're committing. And so he says, إِنَّكُمْ لَتَأْتُونَ الرِّجَالَ شَهْوَةً مِنْ دُونِ النِّسَاءِ بَلْ أَنْتُمْ قَوْمٌ مُسْرِفُونَ. So he says that you're approaching men with desire, shahwatan, as opposed to women, min duni nisa. And then he says that you're indeed musrifun. You're indeed these people who are transgressing the bounds. You are going beyond the bounds. So this is a very important concept. Israf. What is israf? And again, the tafsir explain that these are musrifin in the sense that they are not satisfied with what Allah has made permissible. They're not satisfied with women and having relations with women. Rather, they want more and more and more. And this is a certain quality where it's a disease that you are not satisfied and your shahwa controls you and is pushing you to push the bounds. If you see a line, you want to cross that line. If you see a limit, you want to break that limit. And we all know people like this in different contexts. People who are not satisfied with being told, do this, don't do that, here is the limit, don't cross this limit. They are perpetual line pushers. They just want to keep pushing the line. And so if you are pushing the line due to your shahwa, because you are obeying your desires and you are letting them be unbounded, then it's going to push you into greater and greater indecency, right? You're no longer satisfied with women. You're no longer satisfied with your wife. you're no longer satisfied with what Allah has made permissible and you want to do more. But when you do more, then that's not going to be enough. Then that's not going to satisfy you. After a while, you want to do more after that. So this is what Allah and how Allah is describing Qawm Lut as musrifin. But then also Lut says something very important. He says in the Quran it says قَالَ إِنِّي لِعَمَلِكُمْ مِنَ الْقَالِينَ. Lut makes it very clear. I am indeed of those who loathe, who hate your action. عَمَلَكُمْ. And so this is something that, again, do we have this kind of attitude toward this behavior? Do we have this kind of sentiment? And sometimes I wonder when it comes to what certain Muslims are doing today, especially when we look at modernists, when we look at reformists, when we look at certain feminist groups, they claim to be Muslim, but their attitude towards LGBT is to accommodate, to accept, to celebrate, to promote. Then how can they read these ayat in the Quran and maintain those kinds of positions? These are things that are completely contradictory. You can't be a Muslim and read these ayat of the Quran and then think that it's okay to celebrate or be happy about this kind of behavior on the part of not only Muslims but also non-Muslims. So then what happens in the end of this narrative in the Quran? The angels reveal that they are angels to Lut alayhi salam, and they say, don't worry, don't be stressed because of the action of your people. Actually, we're here to destroy this village, to destroy this town. And in the morning, before morning, you and your family should leave and this town will be destroyed. And that is exactly what happens. Before dawn, they left their home and they left their people. And as they're leaving, they get to the outskirts of the town. And that's exactly when Allah destroys Qawm Lut. And He turns them upside down. And then burning clay is rained upon them. And then as they're leaving, the wife of Lut alayhi salam turns back. And the tafsir again say that this was out of sympathy. And she was apparently close to these people and she was sympathetic towards them. So as she looks back, this was contrary to the command of Allah that when Lut alayhi salam and his family leaves, they should not look back. They should not look back on the people, but she breaks this command and she looks back, and therefore she is considered of those people and she was destroyed and killed as well.